Welcome back to another episode of Y2K Sports Talk. Today we're going to be going over our biggest winners and losers of Week 13, and as always, going over our Thursday night predictions. So let's get started.
So to jump right into one of my winners, I have the Cowboys who, just put on that performance in, what was the most viewed, football game of all time. Dak Prescott and that whole team really put on a clinic. They played phenomenal. They're showing that they really do want to get into this playoff, picture. They want to make a run. They're showing a lot of just, energy. They're showing a lot of heart. They're showing that they're not out of this. That's the main thing that everyone can take away from this. And to do it in that big of, of a moment, it shows that you guys might be for real. But with that being said, moving on to another winner of mine is the Bears. Huge game against the Eagles. Now you're the first seed. You looked great against, the Eagles, who a lot of people didn't really think you were going to win. But I mean, the way you dominated through the run shows you guys can, really do anything. When you have a phenomenal run game like that, it's really hard to beat a team like that. The defense is getting better. Jalen Johnson being, back is huge for them. This team might be, 100% for real. They're starting to show it because at first it seemed like they were only beating up on teams that weren't, probably going to be in the playoff run. But to now do it against the Eagles, it shows that they might be for real. And so for their sake, hopefully they continue that. Another winner is the Panthers. I mean, not really anybody had the Panthers winning that game. So just to come out and look like what you did against the Niners, but then against arguably the best team in at least the NFC, if not the NFL, you put on a clinic. Bryce Young puts on his best performance against the Rams because, his best performance you could say against the Falcons, but that team is not nearly as good as the Rams. So what he did against the Rams, it means more. It shows more. It shows that you can actually, it built more trust in him and it made it to where he has at least another year to prove he can be consistent. He bought himself more time. He's still fighting for a playoff push, and that team still wants to get in. They haven't given up on anybody yet. So big win for them. Another winner I have here is the Texans. They winning a divisional game, which is huge, especially against your division leader at the time, to show that you're still you can perform against anybody as good as you have been. Specifically that defense. That defense can win you any game against any opponent. CJ Stroud being back, since he hasn't played in a while, for what it's worth, he played good. He'll have to clean up some things, but it was rust, knowing that he hasn't played in like around 4 games ish. So huge for them to get their quarterback back, specifically knowing that the playoffs are just around the corner. They're in the playoff, hunt. They soon will be, in the picture, and they have a good chance of actually taking over this division. Everyone's records between them, the Jaguars and the Colts, are all very, very close. That defense being so phenomenal, it gives you that chance to go take that division, go make a playoff run. Another one I had here was the Seahawks defense. That defense is the most clutch defense and the most reliable defense. Talent wise, on just looking at players, you look at the Texans because of the names they got on them. They're also the best defense. Them in Seattle, I think, are the two. And then it'd go the not the Giants, the Broncos. So, the Seahawks, they can look poor on offense and still win games. They barely lost to the Rams after their offense turning the ball over 4 or more times. They then completely shut out the Vikings, even though their offense and JSN didn't come to show up, and they looked very sloppy. The Vikings defense isn't horrible, so obviously they had a good game plan, but that defense shows that they can win you also any game, even if your offense is having a bad day, which is very, very good to have come playoff time, meaning that you have something to rely on just in case. But if both sides are clicking, that team is definitely a reckon. Like that team is a Super Bowl worthy team if everything's clicking. So that's why, they're a winner. I'll give a shout out to the Bills. The Steelers are falling apart. They're getting injured. But considering the fact the Bills needed this win to stay in the playoff picture, it's huge for them. And also they won in a dominant fashion, especially with James Cook. So with that being said, that's my winners. So moving on to my losers, I have the Eagles. They're starting to crumble week after week. It seems like they could even lose this division, which is obviously, it's crazy to think about considering where they started off. The Lions are another loser because of the same reason. Now they're starting to go down a slope. They're losing their division lead. They're starting to lose games they shouldn't lose, or they're getting beat up by their, divisional opponents, which is even worse. So those two are like in the same situation for me. Another one is, like the Steelers for another same reason. You had the division a little bit, and now you're going down a slant, and it doesn't look like you might even make the playoffs. I think I had the Colts, the Rams, and the Chiefs. The Chiefs are kind of in a different category because they needed that win against Dallas to keep staying in the hunt, which they still are, but it's going to be much harder now. So that's why the Chiefs are a loser. But the Rams and the Colts are just like the other ones. You have this lead in your division, but when it comes to real football time, is what they call it in November and December, coming into January is when real football and when it comes down to crunch time, and these teams that were top dogs the rest of the year, they're starting to slip up. It's one game for the Rams right now, but we don't know because with what we've been seeing with these other teams, the Colts, they've been slipping. Eagles slipping, Lions slipping. So with the Rams doing this, considering the fact now you're tied with the Seahawks and you still have to play them, if then the Seahawks could go and win out. Their division, is up for grabs. Anybody can come get that. And with that being said, that's why all these teams that I listed off, besides like the Chiefs, you're starting to slip when you have been dominant the whole season, and it's definitely not good to start slipping at this point in time. So that finishes my losers and my winners of Week 13.
All right, yeah. Almost forgot. Rams, Chiefs, Colts, Lions. Rams, Chiefs, Colts. All right, so to start off my winners and losers, I would want to touch on your losers really quick with the Rams, Chiefs, Colts, and Lions. I mean, I didn't have any of those as my big losers personally, but I did want to like touch on that because very well, just like for the exact same reasons that you gave, I could have them for, my big losers as well. The Lions aren't who we thought they were. The Colts lost two in a row. Chiefs had a very, very important game they dropped. And the Rams, like you had said, like off camera, and it was, saying you losing to the Panthers and then well on camera too, but it was losing to the Panthers, barely beating the Seahawks, it was just a missed field goal away when they, you know, Seahawks were, completely turning the ball over. Rams had four extra possessions at least going their way, and they still only put up 21 points and, almost lost that game and should have lost that game. And, also losing to an injured 49ers team earlier this year as well. So, yeah, just like for your reasons, I agree with all of those. And they very well could be losers for me. But to start off my winners, I do have the Packers to win 31-24 on the road on Thanksgiving. I had the Lions winning that game too. I just felt like, you know, at home on Thanksgiving, they had that magic there. I mean, they're both, pretty even teams, or at least that's what I thought they were heading into week 13, that they were pretty even. And, like I said, the Lions are, much more disappointing than I wanted them to be. And it's unfortunate for them. But some stats from that game: Jordan Love, 18 for 30, 234, four touchdowns, zero interceptions. Josh Jacobs, 17 for 83, so pretty good performance from him. Wicks and Watson for Green Bay, both combined around 180 receiving yards. But it was a huge win for them. They're on a 3-game win streak. And yeah, no, like I said, for the Lions' sake, they've just been really disappointing to me this season, pretty much for everyone. I mean, they're still on the outside of the playoff picture as well, and I feel like they need to go O line. I feel like in the draft that is, a problem. A cornerback is a problem for them as well. They tried to get Frank Ragnow back, and now he had his setbacks because he had an injury that he didn't know he had, and now he can't start for the rest of the Lions season, and we don't even know if he wants to even play for next year for them. So who knows what's going on with that? But either way, for this year, they can't fix that problem. It looks like, and yeah, I mean, with all the talent they have on paper, I mean, with Jared Goff, I mean Gibbs, Montgomery, like literally everyone. I mean, they still have a pretty good O line, somewhat. I mean, Penei Sewell's there, but you would expect them to have a better record than 7-5 with all those stars on their team. So it is pretty disappointing for them. Next up, I got big winner Cowboys. It was pretty much a must win for them. I mean, for both teams, Chiefs and the Cowboys, but the Cowboys got the win. So props to them. They are the winner. Just huge win for them. I mean, the run they're on right now is awesome to watch. I'm happy for them. The defense has definitely picked it up. Obviously, like I've said almost every week, but I'm just excited to talk about it. I mean, ever since the trade deadline with their new acquisitions and, all these players coming back healthy, it's really exciting to watch, and they're definitely clicking. They've made some mistakes here and there, to be fair, but as they've also faced the Chiefs and the Eagles the last, 2 weeks. So, you know, and they beat both teams. They did enough, clearly. And this is definitely, if they had the defense they had at the beginning of the year, they would have lost those 2 games. I can guarantee it. Um, but they are the first team to win games against the back-to-back games against the Super Bowl matchup from the previous year within a 4 or 5 day span. So huge props to them, huge momentum for them. And the momentum is coming at the right time because me and you were talking earlier, and it was Dallas usually wins early and ends up losing late. And this season they're losing early but winning late, and that's obviously the better situation you want to be in with the momentum. You're not going to be like limping into the end of the season. Right now you're coming in full force, so huge for them. Dak Prescott, 27 for 39, 320, 2 touchdowns. He had an interception, but it was an early interception. Other than that, he cleaned it up. Yeah, other than that, he cleaned it up for the rest of the game. CeeDee Lamb probably had the best game of the season for him. I mean, huge game once again for the right time for him, the right time as a team. No drops. He looked amazing. 7 for 112, and he had a touchdown as well. And for Dak Prescott's sake, he's tied for second in touchdowns, second in passing yards, and he's fourth in completion percentage. Put himself back in the MVP race. So, I mean, it's huge for Dallas. They could run the table, and that is going to be amazing. I feel like Dak should win MVP if that happens. And, if they run the table, there is a good chance that they could pass the Eagles and win the division. And that is perfect timing for them. And then, so for next up, I got the Bears as a big winner. They swept their November slate of games. They've won 5 in a row, win against the Eagles. I didn't even have them winning that game, but they were up constantly. The whole game they were up. They weren't even losing, I believe. They're constantly up by double digits as well. Um, and now they're first in the NFC because, I mean, obviously beating the Eagles, so they already have, that's a huge tiebreaker that they have over them, considering the Eagles still obviously have a record right there behind them. And with the Rams loss as well, the Bears now are number one, so that is a huge win for them. That game, they put up, almost 300 rushing yards. They put up 281. Kyle Monangai as a seventh round pick, he's been great. He's been great as a seventh round pick, and specifically his performance against Philly. I think he had like 150 rushing yards. So huge for them. Huge, huge for them. I feel like the Bears still got to clean up a few things here and there. Some of these wins they are scraping by, but either way, a win's a win. Like I said, 5 in a row, and they are number one in the NFC. So you can't really complain about that too much. For the Eagles side, really quick, I feel like they need a new offensive coordinator. They are not clicking. They still do have a good record, but it's definitely looks like a Super Bowl hangover a little bit because they are not playing to, the potential that they should be playing at. I mean, AJ Brown actually did have a great game against the Bears, but how about more of that? Because this is like, one of the few times he's had stats like that this season. So, if they need to, bring him more into, the play calls, they need to throw to him more. And, they just got to figure something out with him. You got to keep him happy. You don't want him leaving. Um, but the Eagles, I feel like their offense of coordinator needs to go because definitely with the talent that they have, they, I mean, they could be undefeated for all we know. So, next up, big winner Panthers. I mean, they've been so up and down this season. They have a win against the Packers. this season, and now the Rams. They also have a loss to the Saints, though, so that what makes them so iffy. I feel like if their offense, everyone could agree if their offense was, mediocre, or I mean a little bit above mediocre, a little bit above average, that they would have a few more wins for sure. I mean, they could be like 9-3 right now. I mean, because right now they're at 7 wins. They very well could have just two more extra if their offense was a little bit better, which 9 wins would put them like top 3 in the NFC. So Bryce Young, he had a great game, 15 for 20, 206, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. The defense picked off Stafford twice. They had a pick six off of him. They forced a fumble off of him. That's 3 turnovers total. For the Rams' sake, like I said, I could have put him as a big loser. I will not put him as a big loser for this week. To me, because obviously they still are a huge threat, but they were in the game for the most part. Obviously, like they had the lead multiple times. They only did lose by 3 points. They were on the road. So obviously it still is something to monitor, as you mentioned, their losses and how they're winning games, like against Seattle, for example. But it is something to monitor for them. I'm not crazy worried because I still have them top 5 in my opinion in the NFL. Um, but it is something to watch out for. But other than that, they did have a great game. Besides the turnovers, which I know obviously completely lost them the game. Devontae Adams did have a great game. Stafford was, pretty accurate and did have, I think, 250 yards that game as well. So not a big deal, not a huge worry. But like I said, I'm gonna monitor that going forward. And then for my last big winner, I have the Texans once again on my big winners list. I think there's like 3 or 4 weeks in a row. But I mean, with the win streak that they're on right now, beating the Colts on the road 20-16. I had the Colts winning that game, but I mean, with the Texans clicking, I probably should have gone them. I mean, like I said, with their win streak, with how they're playing, with CJ Stroud back, like you said, considering how he was out for the last month, he had a pretty good game, and the whole team's momentum and confidence with him back, I know, is through the roof, and they got a huge win on the road. And for the Colts' sake, like I said, that's 2 losses in a row. They're now very shaky, obviously, with the Jaguars and Texans in their division. It's going to be fun to watch, and we're going to see what happens. But the Texans are headed, to the playoff spot in the playoff spots quickly, with all these wins. So definitely going to be watching them. And, Daniel Jones also didn't have a super great game either. I mean, the Texans defense even stopped Daniel Jones. He was like 50% on his completions that game. So huge, huge, huge for the Texans. And then for my big loser, my one and only big loser, I got the Ravens. They still are number one in the division, but I mean, come on. I mean, I did have the Bengals winning on Thanksgiving. Obviously, it was Jamar Chase's first game back from suspension, and more importantly, Joe Burrow's first game back. But you know, them losing the game, but not only losing the game, but only putting up 14 points, losing 14-32 at home, to a divisional opponent. It does not look great because, as I said last week, even though the Ravens are winning these games to get them number one in the division because they just were on a 5-game win streak, I had noted that their offense was still extremely iffy to me and still felt like they still haven't put stuff completely together since Lamar's been back. And you can't have that in the playoffs because I mean, overall, they still went against the Bengals teams, and maybe allowing 32 points was somewhat okay because they only allowed 2 touchdowns. The Bengals did have 6 field goals that game, and obviously, it is the Bengals offense, which is like completely healthy and had everyone. But this is still a Bengals defense that is like last in the league in pretty much everything, and you guys only put up 14 points. Now, I would give a shout out to the Bengals still. Allowing only 14 points to them, and they did have a good game against the Patriots the previous week. They almost even pulled that off. Their defense wasn't too bad that game as well. But either way, for the Ravens, their offense has got to clean it up. And Lamar Jackson, his last 4 games, he only has one game over 200 passing yards, and that was that game against the Bengals when he's down the whole time and he's forced to throw. So of course he's going to get over 200. Um, and his completion percentage could be better as well. And he only has one total touchdown and 3 interceptions since his return. He only has one touchdown, and that was 5 games ago. And yeah, like I said, a 1-3 touchdown interception ratio since he's returned. You can't be playing that way come playoff time, even if the Ravens are going to make the playoffs. Like I said, they're still tied with Pittsburgh, and they got a huge game coming up this next week. So, we'll see what happens. But, I mean, who knows? Because the Ravens offense can't be playing like this for too much longer.
So for my Thursday night football predictions, I have the Dallas Cowboys beating the Lions 34-20. It's kind of similar to what the Packers and the Lions score was. The Cowboys offense is way better than the Packers offense, which is why I have them scoring a little more. But I also feel like, you know, the Lions offense is going to kind of score around the same as they did on the Packers, which, maybe they might score even a little more because, we don't have the pass rush that they do with Parsons, but we have the interior that can stop, hopefully at least try to contain Gibbs. So that's why, they have points up on the board because, Gibbs or a Monroe. Monroe will probably play, it's a very important game. He's going to be forced to play most likely. But that's why I have it going that way. I do have this game, just at first, I think it'll start slow, but I think in the second half, Dallas picks it up and takes the game away and wins 34-20.
All right, and so for my Thursday night predictions, I have the Cowboys winning 31-20. I mean, like you said, pretty much the Cowboys are a much better team than the Packers, like offensively at least. So I would have them scoring more points than what the Packers just did against the Lions. I mean, and then as I've said, I mean, a huge part of what I always talk about is a team's momentum and confidence. And I don't think any team really has that much momentum and confidence like the Cowboys have. So, with their momentum and confidence, with their win streak and everything, like I've mentioned multiple times over the last few weeks, of how good they've been doing, I don't think anything can stop that right now. This is a huge, huge game for them. I mean, if they win this game, I feel like they are going to win the rest of their games because this is probably the toughest team, and being on the road as well. This is probably the toughest game they have left remaining on their schedule. But like I said, with their momentum right now, they have a top 5 offense pretty much everywhere. Number 1 in passing yards, number 1 in offensive total yards. Javonte Williams is a top 5 running back this year in yards. I mean, everything's clicking for Dallas's offense. It's never been a question this year, and their defense is clearly picking it up. And with the Lions' offense that has been shaky, I don't think they can afford to be shaky, and that's why I feel like they're not going to put up as much points, and I feel like they're going to lose that game. And another side note is with the Lions being, all right on defense, nothing too special. I mean, with CeeDee Lamb having his great game, I feel like he just got all of his confidence back, and as well as being a huge game, like I said, him and Pickens, I feel like are going to burn the Lions on Thursday. So I just feel like it's going to be a Dak Prescott clinic. Obviously, he's back in the MVP race. Everything is clicking for Dallas, period. So that's why I have them winning 31-20.
Thank you guys for watching today's video. Hopefully you guys liked it. Hopefully you guys, go back and watch our previous videos. Look forward to our new ones for next week and whatever we have following it. Look out for our videos coming out. We'll be talking about the college football playoffs when those get going. We'll make a video about the championship, who we think is going to win the championship, the matchups. Look out for that. We'll be posting updates on our Instagram about that, our weekly predictions of who we think is going to win this week, and just look out for all of it. But if you like today's video, please like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.